Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another Mad Meta Magic, where we try to make the magic meta mad. Now, I was playing a version of Coffers last time I streamed. I think that version was a failure. The long and the short of it is Blood Chief's Thirst, not really where you want to be. As close as it is to Fatal Push, it's a distant cousin of Fatal Push, because it is not an instant. If it was an instant, we would be playing 4. There's no debate about that. So you'll notice there's a number of changes in this list versus my previous one. I've been collecting data on a lot of my matches as I've been playing them. I've been making notes in a spreadsheet and whatnot, and that information has led me to construct the deck like this. There are some slight changes, but I will do my best to explain them. So the first thing is, the way that I play this deck is a control deck, mostly. If you watch Trellin, he developed a version after my version that tries to play as like a proactive big mana deck, and then Spike developed his version after something else, just jamming powerful black cards in it. But I don't play Expedition Map. I don't play Expedition Map because we don't need Urborg Coffers until we win, so just getting there eventually is fine. I also don't like Expedition Map because it is interactable. So, like, if you are a Tron player, which a lot of my viewers are, if you lead on Expedition Map, a lot of times in the current metagame, it just gets immediately removed on turn 1, hoping that they can disrupt you from assembling Tron. And that's not what you want when you're playing a control deck. Like, if you need to get to something, you need to get to something, and if your means to do so are immediately removed 9 out of 10 times, you're going to have a bad time. So, I don't like map in this version of the deck. The second thing is, I have been swapping up the mana base a lot. It's one area where I personally had not experimented, but I have some concrete numbers to back up my current build. The newest addition is the Verdant Catacombs, and I'll explain that in a minute. So the big change is Barren Moor. This card is really, really good in this deck, and a lot of people think that it's a strange inclusion, and a lot of people were like, Kano, even you were complaining about it. And I said, yes, I know. The difference is, I don't run Castle Lochthwain, I run Barren Moor. I run 25 lands. The cycling on Barren Moor basically means that this is a cantrip like maybe 4 out of 5 times rather than a land. It is almost always, in this build of the deck, correct to cycle Barren Moor. You do not want to draw it. Or you do not want to play it as a land. The only time that it's acceptable to play it as a land is if you are... if you have like an Urborg in your hand, and you know that you're going to need an untapped land later, and basically if you plan out your turns, and it's like, oh, I want to go Barren Moor, Urborg, suspend Profane Tutor, like that sequence of plays I know is going to be powerful in this game, then sure. Otherwise, the only other time it gets played as a land is like super late game when you already have an Urborg and you have multiple coffers and you just like, I just need one more mana to get my swamp count higher. Like, then it's fine. Basically, at every other time you cycle this card, it is just a cantrip. Do not look at it as a land. The other addition is Field of Ruin. This card is almost always a swamp. It's important because it disrupts a couple bad matchups. It also disrupts the mirror match. But like, it takes Amulet players off of a bounce land as they're trying to untap it. It's very powerful. It's also good against Tron, which is a bad matchup. And the cost of including this card is not that high. Oh yeah, so sorry. One thing I forgot to explain about Barren Moor. It's much, much better than Castle Lochthwain in just about every single scenario. Lochthwain, I think, could be better if you're playing Liliana of the Veil and you want to refill your hand after discarding, but I don't. Like, it's so expensive to draw a single card off of Lochthwain's 4 mana, and it costs a lot of life, and it will kill you during aggro, whereas Barren Moor always costs 1 mana to draw. It's a great top deck in the late game, because you're like, okay, I don't need this, cycle it away immediately. I have 1,000,000 mana, I can just play whatever else I draw, right? And it's not terrible if you top deck multiple of it in a row. So like, if I have 20 mana and I just Barren Moor, oh, top decked another Barren Moor, cycle Barren Moor, oh, I top decked another Barren Moor. But Barren Moor, Field, and Verdant Catacombs are all in here to synergize with Cling to Dust, basically, is the other powerful half of this interaction. So I was playing Relic in this slot, and I'm not convinced that Relic is a bad include, but Cling to Dust does most of the time what we need Relic to do, which is take our opponent, like disrupt our opponent off some sort of graveyard strategy, and then draw a card. And the draw card is really powerful, because it's one of the few ways that black can draw cards in a reasonable manner without dying. It's also very important because in an aggressive metagame, like if you're playing against Burn and you're killing their creatures, you want to be gaining life, and this is a way to like undo a bolt every time it's cast. And the escape is relevant too. Like occasionally you're going to get to the late game and just need to draw cards, and this will be sitting around in your grave, and you'll have cast a bunch of other spells, and you're like, all right, so on my opponent's end step, I'll just escape this, draw another card, and try and accrue more advantage that way. I play Profane Tutor because Profane Tutor can grab anything. I normally, I was disliking this card quite a bit because of how many people were playing Chalice and how many people were playing 3-mana Teferi. And honestly, even with those downsides, it's still worth it. This is by far the best tutor in Modern for us. And the reason that I say that is you can play Beseech the Queen, you can play Grim Tutor, you can play Mastermind's Acquisition, you can play Increasing Ambition, and all of those are fine, and they all have some upsides and downsides, but Profane Tutor has the least downsides and is part of some of the most powerful sequences this deck can perform. So what I mean by that is you suspend this on turn 2. It's a way to use your mana against a deck that you know you're not going to need your mana that turn. It's an uncounterable turn 2 play against a lot of decks playing counter spells, so they have to hold up mana for when it comes off of suspend, and they'll know. But if generally it comes off suspend on turn 4, because you suspend this on turn 2, and turn 4 is when you want to play Karn. So now it's, do I counter the tutor or do I counter whatever threat they're going to play? And you don't even have to play a threat, and this could, because this happens before that, so opponent is forced to make the decision then. It also is cast when you have all of your mana. So part of it is like you put this 2 mana on layaway, and you see what your opponent does the next couple of turns. So if you pay attention to your opponent, you'll know what they have because of how they're playing. So if they're constantly representing a counterspell, well, they probably have a counterspell. If they're constantly representing removal, they probably have removal. And if they're playing out creatures nonstop, you just go get Damnation and win the game. Like, it's really powerful because it lets you set aside mana and react later. It's you get the best card in your deck, whatever it is. And making that determination is very difficult. This is a very skill-testing card to play. Anytime you play a tutor like this, you constantly have to be thinking about what the best card you can draw is, what the best card you can tutor for is in that situation. And I can tell you that even as a person who's played this deck since Modern Horizons 2 is released and played a lot of tutors in the Modern format, making that determination, especially if you're playing a list that's very high in a number of singletons, is very, very difficult to make it correctly. And in hindsight, sometimes you'll go like, oh, if only I had tutored for X or Y instead of Z, then I would have won that game. And sometimes there's ways to know that beforehand, and sometimes there's no way. So I think Profane Tutor is ultimately the best card. It's what I'm playing instead of Map, because it can grab Coffers, it can grab Urborg, or it can just go grab a threat or removal or whatever I need to actually win the game. Sign in Blood, I think, is a critical necessity. Almost all of the data that I had pointed to the deck was really, really good on the draw and really, really bad on the play. And in addition to all of that, anytime you mulliganed, like, your win rate went to 0 with one of my previous versions that I was testing a ton. And basically, Sign in Blood is what fixed all of that. Sign in Blood and Barren Moor. We're playing Dismember because it's our second 1-mana removal spell, and I know a lot of people are going to go, Kano, you complain about how this deck does not fare well against aggro because you don't gain a bunch of life and you're paying a bunch of life to do stuff. Why are you playing Dismember? Why aren't you playing Defile? Well, as it turns out, Defile doesn't kill enough things in the early game. Dismember basically always kills what you pointed at, except for large death shadows and late game threats. So this is a removal spell that's good in the early to mid game, and in the late game you can just cast it for 3 mana. You do not have to spend life, which is very important. It not being able to hit planeswalkers like Bloodchief's Thirst or March, like, it's a little bit worse in that regard, but I think between Invoke and March you should be okay versus most planeswalker threats. Also, like, Ugin 6 down tick can kill planeswalkers, but This is the best 1-mana removal spell I've been able to find. It's, generally casting it for 1 mana feels bad, but at the same time, it's not horrible. And I think this is the best way to go. So on top of that, we're playing Damnation. So Damnation's 4 mana, destroy all creatures, they can't be regenerated. The trinket text, they can't be regenerated, actually does matter in the modern format for things like Thrun, which I've been seeing more of, weirdly. People still bring Thrun in against this deck, which is another reason why I'm playing full art Damnations, because everybody forgets that it says it can't be regenerated on it. And I think people still bring in Thrun against me because they're just like, oh, I'm going to play a hexproof threat, he can't kill it. And it's just like, all right, Damnation. But it also matters for Welding Jar, which a lot of the Hardened Scales Urza Saga decks are playing. And I'm not really playing the full art Damnations just because of that trinket text. I just said that. I was playing the Hour of Promise. What is it? The set. After Amonkhet, there's... Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name. But I'm playing the Amonkhet Invocation. I was playing the Amonkhet Invocation Damnation, and I really did not like that art. I really did not like the promo, so I switched to the full art Damnation because I like it better than the regular. And I wanted to play more full arts, but the only full art removal that I could find that like fits in this deck is Doomblade, and I'm not playing that because I think that would be way worse than what we're doing here. Karn, still the best threat this deck can play for a lot of reasons. I'm not going to go too in-depth to this. I've talked about it before. That's why we have a Karnboard. The Invoke Despair is one of the other big payoffs. It's one of the things I tested immediately post-Kamigawa, and it's one of the things that have been great in this deck for a lot of reasons. And then we're playing 6-mana Ugin. So 6-mana Ugin I really, really like because it synergizes with Karn super, super well. You can play 6-mana Ugin, then you can play Karn for 2 mana, and then you can wish for Liquimetal Coating and play it for free. Like, that's a really, really powerful thing to do with 8 mana. And on top of that, Ugin answers problem permanents that you otherwise couldn't because, for example, Black has no way to really deal with enchantments super efficiently. And I know there's Feed the Swarm, and I know there's Debt to the Kami, and I know there's Farika's Libation, and I know there's Invoke Despair, but like, how do you deal with Leyline of Sanctity? And the answer is you don't and beat anything else. So Ugin kind of helps in that regard. Other than that, he sort of draws cards, and he turns your Damnation into a draw spell, which does actually matter. And there's times where you think to yourself, like, I need to draw this card immediately, but I have no way to do that on board, and I'm holding Damnation. Do I uptick Ugin before or after I Damnation? And the answer is, well, does the creature or your theoretical card draw matter more? On top of that, he wins with damage, which is important because a lot of your win conditions in this deck win with damage. You win with Sundering Titan Beatdown. You win with Invoke Despair Life Drain. You win with Walking Ballista. So making 2/2s and drawing cards is just a good game plan in this deck. The other thing is he's very, very similar to Liliana Dreadhorde General, which is an effect that I really, really liked in this deck. In that he's a 6-mana Planeswalker, he makes tokens on uptick, and he answers stuff with downticks. He doesn't have an alt that wins the game, but at the same time, Liliana Dreadhorde General, I don't think I've ever alted in over a year of playing. It might have happened once. But has it been a year? I don't know if it's been a year or not. I might have lied there, but since Modern Horizons 2 release. The other thing is, like, Liliana has to stay around on board for her tokens to draw you cards when they die. Ugin's tokens draw you cards whether or not he lives, which is a very important distinction because Liliana, like, giving you a token is like, okay, well, it gave you 1 card. Ugin giving you a token that must be answered that draws you a card when it dies is 2 cards, and that's a huge difference. And if he sticks around on board, of course, then, like, you know, he's just going to accrue more advantage. We're still playing March. We're only playing 2 in this version. It's important. It's not critical. One of the biggest problems that I had was, like, multiple March hands were super awful, especially as removal in the early game. Like, it's fine, it's good, you can use it, but pitching cards when you desperately need them to win the late game, like, imagine if a control player had to pitch, 1 or 2 other white cards to Path to Exile or something like that. It would make the card way worse, right? So we'd frequently have to do that with March. The life gain would not be relevant enough to let you survive. Like, card quantity matters a ton in this deck. So it shines best in the mid to late game. It's still important because it hits Planeswalkers targeted, and it's still important because it gains you life. So it's something you can use to stabilize in the late game. It's something you can use in emergency in the early game, though I discourage you from doing so unless absolutely necessary. Okay, so that's the entire main board. I have some sideboard discussions. I still think Necromentia is probably a critical effect to play. Thought Distortion, I would never bring this in against a green deck. I have been blown out several times by opponents just playing Veil or top-decking Veil. I don't play discard, so I can't... other than Invoke, I don't have black spells that target my opponent. So against Veil, like anything that you think might be running Veil of Summer, be extremely careful if you're going to cast Thought Distortion, because it's not going to resolve. They don't have to counter it. They can just make themselves hexproof, and that's a problem. Fulminator Mage is great in any of the proactive matchups where like Dismember or Fatal Push is going to be bad. You can just bring it in. It's great versus Living End because it slows them down. It's great versus Tron because it blows up their Tron lands. It's great versus Control even. So there are lots of times where you want Fulminator Mage, and I'm not sure if this card should be main deck or not. I know some people on the Coffers Discord and some people on my Discord, where I maintain the Coffers Primer, plug if you guys want to join my Discord, to see actually how to play this deck in depth with the guide and not listen to me ramble. But a lot of those people have been playing it in the main deck with some success. I don't think it's bad. I will say, though, it is not Reign of Tears. Do not run Reign of Tears. If you want this effect, shell out for Fulminator Mage. And the reason being is Fulminator Mage does not get hit by Force of Negation. Fulminator Mage does not get hit by Spell Pierce. Fulminator Mage is a creature in the event of Living End happening, so you just sack it, blow up a land, untap Damnation, and sack it again. So the fact that it's a creature matters a ton. That's the point that I'm making. As for the Karnboard, the Karnboard is getting kind of full. I'm not sure what I need to cut, if anything, but a lot of these effects I find, like, the bigger your Karnboard, the better Karn is generally, because of the higher diversity of effects you can get from his abilities. The only weird includes that I'm going to talk about here are Dross Golem. Dross Golem might look like an unplayable, Darksteel common, but it's not. So in the event that you're on... Most of the time when you're casting Karn, the problem becomes, I can play Karn, but Karn is going to die if I wish. So what ends up happening is, when you play out Karn, generally, if you can get him to stick for a turn, you untap, play another Coffers, have 9 mana, and then cast Sundering Titan. It's not a problem. But getting him to survive matters a lot. So, I mean, if your opponent has a burn spell, they have a burn spell. But frequently what ends up happening is your opponent has only one creature that can attack Karn. And if you have Coffers, and you have Urborg, and you have 4 lands total, you make 5 mana, you play Karn, you wish for Dross Golem, and you play Dross Golem on one. And Dross Golem just blocks. And then you untap, play a Coffers, wish with Karn again, and win. So it actually matters a ton. Not to mention, it is just another threat. It's a threat you can play for free and hold up mana pretty frequently. It has fear, and there's not a ton of black creatures in the modern format. There are a few. So it's significantly worse in those matchups, but like sometimes it's just a 3-2 unblockable, and sometimes that's all you need to win the game. You know, it dodges Fatal Push, it dodges Prismatic Ending, it does not dodge Burn, but it's somewhat removal resistant, despite having a hilariously bad stat line, you know, being a 3-2 for 5. So don't count this card out too quick, is my point. And that's really the only strange include in the Karnboard. The rest of it's pretty standard, so... Sorry for the 20-minute deck tech. At least it was 20 minutes of recording. I have no idea what it'll be post-processing once I get this edited, but we'll see. I will see you guys in round 1. Alrighty, welcome to round 1, everybody. We've won the die roll. I would like to play first. I think this hand is perfectly fine. We're going to keep. And we're going to start with Swamp. Pass the turn. Generally, what I'm going to do here is probably cycle Barren Moor, unless I need to Dismember. Okay. Then cycle Barren Moor. We draw another Barren Moor. That's fine. Okay, we got Profane Tutor. So, I'm going to play Urborg. Now, we have a couple of different options here. I don't think it's necessary to represent Dismember against a blue-red deck on 2. I could Sign in Blood, or I could Profane Tutor. So, like... I don't think I need to cycle Barren Moor. It's generally when I need to hold up removal and then want to draw at the end step. Sign in Blood is almost never a turn 2 play. If you have the option between Sign in Blood and Profane Tutor, generally Profane Tutor is better. Sign in Blood is like better as a turn 3 play and beyond because you're generally trying to draw something. Like if on 2, even if I had no other lands in my hand, I would still suspend Profane Tutor first because on turn 3 with 2 mana, I'd rather Sign in Blood, try and draw another land, and then rather than have to Profane Tutor for a land. So, okay, Profane Tutor comes off Suspend next turn. So I'm going to play Field, and I'm going to cast Sign in Blood here. I'm thinking my opponent is Murktide. If they have counterspells, they'll probably counterspell this Sign in Blood. Okay. Opponent considers in response. Puts Polluted Delta in the grave. We draw a Fatal Push and another Sign in Blood. And pass the turn. The other nice thing about Dismember is it does pretty frequently kill Murktide if they play it out. Whereas like Fatal Push, Bloodchief's Thirst generally don't without investing tons of mana. Okay, opponent plays a Dragon's Rage Channeler. And they are passing. Okay. I'm going to cycle Barren Moor here. Even though I don't have another land to play, I think generally this is correct. See, I drew Coffers. Drawing a lot of cards prior to Profane Tutor like this lets you Profane Tutor with the best possible information, which I think is very important. So what are my options here? I can get Karn. Karn is reasonable because I do have a Coffers. I can get another Coffers because I'm probably going to draw more cards with Sign in Blood. And just to have like extra mana is probably good. I think it's probably best that we just take the Karn and then see what we draw for turn. Okay, Invoke Despair is not unreasonable. So we get a Coffers. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is start with a Fatal Push. Okay. Now, because my opponent was representing a counterspell and did not attempt to protect Dragon's Rage Channeler, I'm going to follow this up with Sign in Blood rather than Karn. You do have to play a little bit safe around your threats. And we drew Profane Tutor, so there's no reason not to suspend it with the 1 floating mana. I don't think I'm going to need to Dismember. They very rarely have instant speed threats, and the way that this particular version of the deck is built, I'm not too worried about like a hasted Ragavan right now. I actually think that would probably waste my opponent's mana to try and cast that. Okay, so we untap. Profane Tutor is ticking down. I can try and just cast an Invoke Despair this turn. Or I can represent double Dismember. I think I'm just going to wait. I have March, I have Dismembers, I have Damnations. I'm going to wait for this Profane Tutor to come off Suspend, and maybe we'll get some value that way. So opponent had an Archmage's Charm. So in a way, if I had cast Invoke Despair, I probably would have prevented my opponent from drawing 2 cards. So that kind of would have been like a 1 for 2. Even if my opponent was forced to use this as a removal spell. Okay. Opponent casts a Ragavan, then plays an island. So I'm going to cast Dismember on my opponent's end step. Okay, it resolves. We untap. Profane Tutor coming off Suspend. If this resolves, we get another Coffers. Pretty easy. Okay, opponent has a counterspell. They likely have a second counterspell. Okay. So now because we need to draw lands... I am going to try and Invoke Despair here. This will likely get countered. Opponent has played almost no threats and represented counterspells this whole game. So we're kind of at the point where we're going to need to do something, right? So we can eventually resolve a threat that will win the game. Opponent plays a land. It's actually kind of good news for us because it means that our opponent is not drawing action. So let's cast another Invoke Despair. Okay, that resolving is a very good sign for us. I'm going to suspend Profane Tutor again. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps. Plays a Bauble. Well, it's a redraw. They're going to bauble our top deck. They pass. They draw a card. Profane Tutor ticking down. We draw another Urborg. So, float a bunch of mana. Try casting an Ugin. Okay, I should have played Urborg to play around Spell Pierce. I kind of forgot that they played that. And they knew what we draw, so there was no reason not to do that. Okay. Well, in that case, it was a punt. Okay, opponent has a Dragon's Rage Channeler. They play a Steam Vents tapped. Okay, I am going to Dismember here. Opponent does not protect their threat, so they are probably out of action spell, or out of counter spells. Let's cast Profane Tutor. Let's go get a second Coffers. And we draw a Swamp. Play Coffers. Get a bunch of mana. Okay, we've got 12 mana, so we can go for the Sundering Titan here. Play Karn. Wish with Karn. Get Sundering Titan. Play Sundering Titan. Okay. So now we can get rid of Swamp, Mountain, Island. And I chose those lands specifically to leave a mountain on board, so that if they do answer Sundering Titan, I can kill all three. I can kill 3 more lands. They probably have a Bolt for Karn. Yep. Okay. That's another reason why I was waiting to play out Karn. If their specific answer was not a counterspell, we could resolve Sundering Titan in the same turn. All right, opponent scoops. So that's good news. Now, versus Murktide. There's a couple of things I can do here. Murktide generally does not play that many threats. They play like a playset of Ragavan, a playset of Dragon's Rage Channeler, a playset of Murktide, and then like generally a singleton Brazen Borrower. So there's some notion that I should be playing Necromentia, because if you Necromentia a threat when all of the threats on board that are killed, and you just name whatever they have the most of left, that is a threatening action that they either have to counterspell, or you stop them from getting a threat for up to like a third of the game, because they have less to draw. And I've had some success with that line. I don't know if it's better or not in this version, because I've made quite a few changes. And I'm not sure what I would side out. Because, like, really, we are kind of set up to beat Murktide in general. The other option that's really tempting is Fulminator Mage, because it can't be spell-pierced. Disrupting their mana is, like, the same as disrupting all of their stuff. If they try and bolt Fulminator, we just still get value out of it. And, I think it's going to be fine to bring that in. The question is, if I do that, what do I take out? And I think the answer is I can probably drop Ballista and maybe like a Dismember. Dismember like being good, but being a little bit worse. And I think a Damnation. And we'll try bringing in 3 Fulminator here. This is not a sideboard I typically do for this deck, but I'm still kind of experimenting to figure out what's good and when. Okay. Opponent is going to fill the grave, and we're on the draw. We have 2 1-mana cantrips and a 1-mana removal. I think this is fine. It's kind of sketchy, but we play 25 lands, so the odds we draw a land is pretty high. Okay. So play out a Swamp, pass the turn. Now I could, in response to my opponent cracking Flooded Strand, Cling to Dust, but that would open me up to like a turn 2 Ragavan dash. So I think it's better that we try and cling on our opponent's turn, because if opponent wants to counterspell this, like, that's no great loss, just so long as we draw any lands. And there might be a higher value target. We'll see. It also, of course, lets us represent Dismember. So opponent puts a Murktide Regent into the grave, and they shock a Steam Vents. So let's go ahead and cling Consider. Okay, we draw Profane Tutor. Untap, we draw Barren Moor. So let's see. Yeah, I guess this is one of the times I'm going to have to play Barren Moor. I could try and draw again, but it's a little risky. Especially if your opponent sees you on 1 mana play a second cantrip before you play a land, they might think that you don't have any lands to play. And in that scenario, they may actually counterspell, which would be a little bit hazardous for us. So this also, like, playing Barren Moor guarantees we have the second black mana symbol to cast Sign in Blood, which is really important. Opponent plays a Spire Bluff Canal. So let's go ahead and cling again. Okay, we draw Karn. Untap, we draw Invoke Despair. Okay, well, it is turn 3, and we don't have a land, so I believe it's time to Sign in Blood. This will likely draw a counterspell. It did not. That's interesting. Okay. Play Coffers, pass the turn, and we're going to discard probably an Invoke Despair. Okay, opponent Archmage's Charm. So Coffers feels kind of bad here, but we did at least draw a land to play. We have 4 Urborgs in the deck, so if we get any of them, we instantly have tons of mana. Okay, opponent plays a Spire Bluff Canal and a Mishra's Bauble. They're looking at our top deck. We untap, they draw a card, then we draw a card. We draw Fulminator. So now the question is, what do we do? We have a few different options. We can Dismember, we can suspend Profane Tutor, or we can Sign in Blood. If my opponent has a counterspell, we should either Profane Tutor now or Dismember on their turn to get rid of the counterspell. And I think it's better to suspend Profane than it is to try and cast Sign in Blood here, even though we're missing a land drop. Because if opponent lets Profane resolve, we get Urborg and we're fine. If they use a counterspell, that potentially opens us up to casting a Sign in Blood, Dismember, or both. And we're only taking 3 damage, so it's not like a critical amount of damage. Okay, opponent casts an Expressive Iteration. So let's see what they exile. They put, I think, Archmage's Charm into the grave, exiling Spire Bluff, so they play a tap land. We untap, Profane Tutor ticking down. We draw another Profane Tutor. Okay, I'm going to try and Sign in Blood for a land. They should counter this because we missed a land drop, and because they have an active Dragon's Rage Channeler. Okay, they did not. So, play a Swamp. And even though I have 8 cards, I think the correct choice here is I'm going to discard this other Profane Tutor. I'm not going to Dismember on my turn, because a counterspell is just, like, absolutely no cost for them to play. We have a Profane Tutor coming off of Suspend next turn, and then we can cast a bunch of things, because we'll have a ton of mana. Okay, opponent attacks for 3. This is quite painful, especially considering it's probably going to get countered. If my opponent would have Double Bolt, then that would be a problem. It resolved, which is not what I had expected. So opponent is going to look at our top deck. They cast a Ragavan. So we untap, they draw a card. We cast Profane Tutor. Like, once again, they probably should counter this. Okay, they do. So we draw another Profane Tutor. So I have a couple of options. I can cycle Barren Moor, try and draw a Swamp. I can play Barren Moor, which doesn't help that much. I can suspend Profane Tutor, or I can play Fulminator, try and block and nuke a land. I think because my opponent is being stingy with counterspells, best course of action is to actually cycle Barren Moor, see if we hit something like Fatal Push, and suspend Profane Tutor if we don't. Okay. So we got a Fatal Push. Yeah, I'm going to cast this immediately. Okay, they have Flusterstorm. Well, we couldn't pay for that whether they cast it on our turn or theirs. Okay. So we'll pass to our opponent's turn. A single Swamp turns Coffers into a regular land here, so... Opponent exiles a Swamp. Plays a Dragon's Rage Channeler. We draw Verdant Catacombs. Okay, that is a Swamp. A painful Swamp, but a Swamp nonetheless. We're going to go ahead and try and cast an Invoke. We're probably losing this game at this point. Okay. So, I mean, I'm not technically dead, but I am dead to Bolt. So I guess I should play this out. The real problem is we just didn't draw other lands. And this is one of the rare times where, like, Barren Moor was not that great. Okay, opponent hits us for 5. We're going to 1. Well, they can cast a Damnation if they want to. They don't. We draw another Coffers, which is just a land here. So let's cast an Invoke. They'd have to be out of counter spells, and we'd have to draw like a push. And I can't imagine that's the case, so... Okay. Well, it was a risky keep to begin with. Yeah, I don't think I want the Fulminators. They would be better on the play, actually. I do want Thought Distortion, though. Yeah, I'll play a couple Fulminators. I still think this is an okay sideboard. I would like to play first. It's not the greatest opener. I could cycle Barren Moor and then draw again with Cling. I think we've got better 5s. This is a way better 5. So I'm going to keep this. I'm going to put back Verdant. If we draw, like, any action spell at all, just, like, removal, we're in a good place. And if opponent keeps a slightly, like, clunkier hand where they don't immediately go turn 1 threat or, like, threat on turn 2, this hand gets better. Okay. Opponent considers. They want to draw whatever they saw with the Surveil. Okay. Opponent plays out multiple threats into a bauble. They Surveil the same thing to the top both times. It's probably a counterspell. So opponent's looking at her top deck. It's a Verdant Catacombs. So play Verdant. Suspend Profane Tutor number 2. Pass the turn. So we will get to cast a Damnation, but it probably will not resolve. So if this is a Dash Ragavan, probably what that means is opponent has a Spell Pierce or a Flusterstorm. Okay, opponent attacks us for 2. We untap. Profane Tutor comes off suspend. Yeah, I think we do have to get Damnation, even though it's probably going to get countered. I could go and get Coffers here, and then try and get Thought Distortion after the fact. That might be too slow. It's safe. It just might be slow. I think that's actually a better play, so I'm going to go get Coffers. Okay, we got a Barren Moor. So, play an Urborg. Cycle Barren Moor. Let's get some information. Okay. Suspend Profane Tutor. Pass the turn. Yeah. This is the other reason that Profane Tutor is actually quite good. Is opponent is playing very conservatively with their counterspells. So they're letting Profane Tutors resolve rather than and then trying to counter the thing that I grab. So like grabbing lands and grabbing Thought Contortion here is going to be really good. Opponent is also using Bauble on their own turn because they want an extra card on ours, telling me they might be light on counterspells, so like maybe Contortion is bad. Opponent plays out a Ragavan. They draw an extra card. So Profane Tutor number 2 ticks down. Profane Tutor number 1 ticks down. Let's cast Profane Tutor. Okay, I am going to go for Thought Contortion because it's going to take them off Delirium and a lot of stuff in their hand. And then when this one resolves, I'll get Damnation. Since it takes them off Delirium, we're only taking 4 next turn, and we should be okay. Okay, play Cabal Coffers. And Thought Distortion. So they will have, like, some lands and a Murktide in their grave. It's a little bit unfortunate since they can, like, cash in that Fiery Islet, but if they're holding Archmage's Charm, the correct thing to do is to Archmage's Charm and draw cards here, because they could draw lands, which they would get to keep. Lands or creatures. Yep. Okay. So opponent gets to Surveil. Okay. Opponent had a fistful of good stuff, so they're losing everything but Murktide and most of the stuff from their grave. Okay. So now we should be able to pretty safely Damnation, especially if they play a land and, like, run out Murktide. Okay. Opponent attacks us for 4. We go down to 8. Opponent hits a Sign in Blood. They can cast Sign in Blood. Yep, and they do. So that's a pretty good hit for them in this circumstance. I think they put a... Yeah, they put Steam Vents into their grave and left 1 on top. Okay, they play a Bauble and Surveil again. So the other problem is, while we've been Profane Tutoring, we've basically only drawn lands. Okay, opponent plays another Bauble and a tap land. Tap land is good because it means they can only have Flusterstorm or Spell Pierce. So Profane Tutor is going to have to grab us a Damnation. Maybe March would be good here, playing around Spell Pierce at least, but Damnation's just a lot more efficient. So we don't have enough to play Ugin and Damnation, unfortunately. Yeah, we still do this, though. So, Damnation. Pass the turn. Opponent can play a Murktide, but it'd be a small Murktide. Okay, they play Dragon's Rage Channeler. They dash a Ragavan. They are representing Counterspell. Okay. Opponent hits a Profane Tutor. They can't actually suspend this, because it has to be from hand. Draw another land. Alright, well. Play an Ugin. Opponent considers. They leave it on top. They have Delirium. And they drew a Counterspell. Alright. So, basically, the reason we lost is because we drew only lands. Profane Tutor was an all-star, but the only way that we really stand a chance here is if opponent does not hit Bolt, goes all in on a Ragavan to take us to 1, and then we top deck March and march this Dragon's Rage Channeler for 1 billion. That's the only way that we stand a chance at actually winning. So, opponent drew an island. Dashes Ragavan. Okay. Opponent hits us down to 1. They draw Dismember. There might be a line where, like, we invoke into instant speed removal, but I think opponent was slow rolling a Bolt, maybe. Okay, they cast Murktide. We untap. We draw Invoke. So I can either play a land now or see if I draw into another Coffers. I think I'm going to Invoke first. The difference between, well, I guess it could matter. Let me think about this. So if I Invoke now, I have 7 mana, 4 left over, and if I don't draw Coffers, I'll have 5 mana. The difference between 5 and 6 is Ugin, but Ugin doesn't win because we'd still die to Ragavan if we downticked. So I'd have to draw other removal in addition if I play a land first, which I couldn't play if I played Ugin. If I Invoke first and I draw Coffers and anything that isn't Sign in Blood, like maybe we stand a chance. So I think the answer is to Invoke first. Okay, we got Ugin and Fulminator, which is not a winning line, unfortunately. So yeah, we lasted a really long time. We just didn't have a way to win. I had 6 mana left over because for some reason I thought Invoke was going to take all my mana. So I could have gotten up to 7. I still think that was the correct line to play out, but unfortunately we just didn't get it. So I will see you guys in round 2. Alrighty, round 2, here we go. We're against M. Hayashi. So I know M. Hayashi Magic Matt on YouTube generally plays a lot of mono red. I think this hand is fine to keep. Whoops, accidentally switched view, didn't mean to. Alright, opponent starts with a Dragon's Rage Channeler. We draw Ugin, so I'm going to lead on Urborg, pass the turn. Okay, opponent plays a Field of Ruin. They're going to Cleansing Wildfire my Urborg. I'm going to go ahead and cycle a Barren Moor. Opponent surveils a Mountain into the grave. They do get to draw a card off Cleansing Wildfire. Opponent attacks us for 1. We untap. We draw Cabal Coffers, so let's go ahead and Cling Cleansing Wildfire. Play Verdant, pass the turn. So, Cling here just helping us keep our opponent off of card types in the grave. Second Dragon's Rage Channeler for our opponent. And a Soul Guide Lantern. Okay, so you're going to exile Cling to Dust, that's fine. And they play a Spikefield Hazard and hit us for 1. So they can get an artifact into the grave whenever they want. I'm going to actually fetch a swamp here because I don't have Urborg. Okay, we draw Sign in Blood. So I have 2 options. I can either suspend Profane Tutor, or I can cast Sign in Blood. If I suspend Profane Tutor, I'll have 1 black mana floating and nothing, or 1 black mana that I can use and nothing to do with it. I could also play Field and activate. Opponent already has lands in grave. That technically, I think, gives them 1 extra mana. I think as unhealthy as it is for us, we've got a Sign in Blood here. Okay. We draw Barren Moor, which is not a swamp. I can play Cabal Coffers, but then I have to draw a swamp to make it to 4 mana. Or I can play Field and hope to draw another untapped land to get to Damnation. Or I can play out Barren Moor now and play Field and Damnation next turn. That seems like the best line that we've got, so I'm going to go with that. Okay. So I'm actually going to discard Profane Tutor here. I think it's going to be too slow. Sign in Blood, as painful as it is probably still what I'm going to need. Okay. Opponent casts a Reckless Impulse. They put an instant into the grave, and this will get a sorcery into the grave. Opponent draws another Reckless Impulse and an Atsushi. They cast the Reckless Impulse out of exile. So they're going to hit us for 6 down to 9. Opponent puts a Bone Crusher Giant into the grave. They get a Ghost Quarter and another Atsushi. So that's probably what they're following up with. We untap. We draw Fatal Push. So play Field of Ruin. And let's go ahead and cast Damnation. So Urborg would be best top deck, at least temporarily. Opponent plays Ghost Quarter out of exile and plays Atsushi. We untap. We draw Swamp. Swamp is great because it lets us cast Invoke here. So opponent can either get 3 treasure tokens or 2 cards off the top of their deck. And we're going to get 2 cards here. Okay, opponent's going to cycle Soul Guide Lantern. We get a Dismember and a March. March is going to be pretty good. Opponent hits Unholy Heat and Soul Guide Lantern. Opponent plays another Ghost Quarter. Another Soul Guide Lantern. This almost seems like it's doing too many things that aren't aggressive, this particular version. Opponent fields us, which makes our deck better. Or makes our board better. Okay, they play a Seasoned Pyro. They ditch Cleansing Wildfire and Lightning Bolt. Okay. We untap. We draw Karn. So I can play Cabal Coffers, turn 4 into 6 mana, and then have 7 with Barren Moor. So I can't play Ugin and Karn and Chalice on one all in the same turn and then, like, march a thing. That seems pretty good. Right? Like... Oh, I can't play Ugin and Karn. That's way too much mana. So actually, probably playing that Cabal Coffers was not correct. I could play Karn and put Chalice on one, and then, like, Fatal Push a thing. Well, Fatal Push first, but Karn's gonna die either way if I do that. I can play Ugin, uptick, and then have Push. So I think I'm gonna go with that, actually. It's also, like, I do have the ability to march for a bunch of life. Although if I'm gonna do that, I need to do that now. Yeah, let's go ahead and uptick. And I'm going to march and, like, throw almost my whole hand away here. The question is whether or not I want to keep push. I think the answer is no. Now, opponent, if they do have an Unholy Heat, they can kill Ugin. They've already exiled 1 and have 1 in the grave, but they've drawn, quote-unquote, a lot of cards. Opponent likely Ghost Quarters or Fields Coffers here, regardless of what they do, which would be fine. We don't need that much mana, especially not with Ugin out. And if we top deck another Coffers, we can just, like, Karn into Sundering Titan, which would only destroy 1 land, but it would be a massive threat for our opponent to have to deal with. It would blow up one of ours, though, because we don't have Urborg. Okay, they attack Ugin for 2. Chump with a token, or block with a token, I mean. Ugin takes 1. They stomp Ugin, play a tap land, spike Field Hazard, we get a card, and then bolt Ugin to kill him. That was a lot of resources spent. Okay, we draw Coffers. So if I play Coffers, I can activate for 5, get 8 total, and have 9 mana total. Which would be enough to play Karn and put, like, Chalice on one. Which seems to be a lot of our opponent's deck. They would be able to attack and probably kill him with Den of the Bugbear, so maybe I go for, like, Ensnaring Bridge. Because I can play 2 cards out of my hand this turn. Yeah, I think I'm going to go for that. So play Karn. Wish. We'll get Ensnaring Bridge. Play it out. Then pass the turn. So opponent cannot attack with Den of the Bugbear now. They would have to top deck Artifact Removal, which I'm not sure if they have in the main deck. Opponent attacks Karn down to 2. This also does prevent them from redrawing with Soul Guide Lantern, which is maybe somewhat important. Opponent plays a land, Ghost Quarters Coffers, sure. We get a swamp. Untap. We draw Cling to Dust. So I can just use up this Karn and get a Sundering Titan, or a Walking Ballista. I can Cling. I think Sundering Titan's probably the safest, although Walking Ballista is really tempting because I can put it X4. Let's do Walking Ballista because that actually represents a way to win the game. It does let my opponent cycle off of Soul Guide Lantern if I do this. I'm going to go ahead and ping now. This does open Ballista up to a top deck Bolt, but it's not that big of a deal. I do have to be more careful with Chalice in the side here because we do have 1-mana spells that we want to cast repeatedly in the form of like Cling. Opponent makes 2 1/1s. They go to combat. They attack us for 2. Okay, block 1. Opponent plays a tap land. Probably cast Bone Crusher. And they're going to stomp Ballista. That was not the right order. If you were going to stomp, you needed to cast Bone Crusher after the fact. Because this is only damage on spell target. Oh, never mind. I'm dumb. And Mayashi plays this game a lot more than I do. And is better at it. But we did at least fizzle the other Bone Crusher, so there's that. We untap and draw Fatal Push. I don't think we need to Cling to gain life. I think clinging to draw cards is probably the way to go. So Cling a random Field of Ruin. Play Verdant. Crack Verdant. Get a Swamp. Push Bone Crusher. Then play Karn. And I am gonna go get Chalice and I'm gonna put it on 1. Actually, is Coating just better? No, because Chalice protects him from Bolt and Unholy Heat. Now we can get Liquimetal Coating and just continually blow up all our opponent's lands, and then what are they gonna do? Okay, opponent plays a land. They Ghost Quarter our field, sure. Get a Swamp. That is our last basic. We get a push. So we wish. We get Liquimetal Coating. Play it. Throw push into the Chalice, just so I don't forget. Pass the turn. Stop on my opponent's upkeep. Just shut off a random land. So opponent needs like another stomp to kill Karn. Cleansing Wildfire. Okay, no basic lands left. Opponent Reckless Impulses into a Mountain and a Lightning Bolt. We untap. We draw Sign in Blood. So Sign in Blood's kind of a bad pickup here. But Ugin's not. Okay. We should be able to win pretty quickly with damage from Invokes. So we've got a March under the token. Opponent's got Natsushi. Okay. We have no basic lands left. Untap. We draw another Karn. Let's continue blowing up manlands. I'm going to down tick on Atsushi, see what they hit. Another Atsushi and a Spike Field Hazard. I'm going to cast Invoke. It's going to drain him for a bunch of life. Suspend a Profane Tutor. And pass the turn. I suppose I should have attacked there, but I guess if they could kill this, they could attack with the Den of the Bugbear, so it wouldn't entirely be correct, but it was mostly correct to attack there. We draw a Fatal Push. Let's go ahead and blow up the other manland. Damnation. Opponent hits Seasoned Pyromancer. We make another token. And pass the turn. Opponent has played almost their whole deck. Okay, opponent's got a field. Sure. So I guess strip mining me repeatedly, and it's not a terrible backup plan. Opponent dumps a lightning bolt they can't cast. Let's go ahead and pitch Fatal Push to March. Can March Seasoned Pyro. Untap. Profane Tutor coming off Suspend. And I think it's Invoke here. Okay. Blow up another land. Make another token. Attack for 2. I could play Karn and just wish for like a relic and exile the grave. Because that lets me empty my hand enough that I don't think it's necessary. Let's do this and draw some cards. We might draw land and then get to do whatever we want anyway. Well, it's a tap land. That's fine. Pass the turn. We're late enough in the game, tap lands won't matter. I'm going to have to start playing faster because I've used a ton of time. Okay, opponent ditches cards they can't cast. They Cleansing Wildfire us. Okay, we untap. We draw an Urborg. So, Sign in Blood. Play Urborg. Make a token. It's a Barren Moor. Let's just exile a random card here. Oh, never mind. Get that out of our hand anyway. Suspend Profane Tutor. Blow up a mountain. I guess technically I should wish for Relic so that I can get Walking Ballista again. In theory, I'm going to draw it soon, and I have a Profane Tutor to get the one out of my deck. If my opponent attacks with the Seasoned Pyro, I can block with this token, or my opponent can just give it to me anyway. It's fun playing the shell game. Opponent does not attack. Profane Tutor taking down. We draw Damnation. Cast Damnation. Okay, we get a Barren Moor. We get a Verdant Catacombs. Cycle Barren Moor. Play Verdant. Suspend Profane. Blow up another land. Then make another token. Pass the turn. Okay, opponent Reckless Impulses into 2 cards they can't cast. Plays a Spikefield Hazard again. We untap. Profane Tutor ticks down. Profane Tutor ticks down. We'll get Walking Ballista as the backup plan. We draw another Karn. This should kill them, though. There we go. You know, in a situation like that, I need to be careful because Invoke Despair will kill me and my opponent if I deck as they die to damage. The question is, do I want Necromentia in this matchup? It doesn't seem like they played that many threats, so like maybe Necromentia hitting a what do you call it? A threat of theirs is probably pretty good. I think I'm gonna bring in Fulminators just to have like chumps and then destroy stuff. Opponent is playing a lot of non-basic lands, and I think I'm gonna cut Dismembers to be able to do that, as well as like maybe a Sign in Blood. Try it like this. Okay, I will keep this hand. What we do depends on our opponent's start. Okay. Do I want to march? I actually think that's kind of prudent. I'm going to march, and I'm going to pitch Invoke Despair. I'll have to make a much different sequence of plays than I normally would. I was actually kind of hoping to cycle this Barren Moor, but the opponent has answers to our artifacts. We draw Fatal Push. I'm going to go ahead and cling my own March to draw a card. Pass the turn. I guess I should have done that first before I played Barren Moor because drawing a swamp makes like Fatal Push better. Okay. Opponent plays a Spikefield Hazard off a Reckless Impulse. They did get another Reckless Impulse. So let's immediately Fulminator. I guess Field is annoying. Pass the turn. Okay, they Reckless Impulse again. They play another Spikefield Hazard. We draw our own field. So let's Sign in Blood. Then play Field and suspend Profane Tutor. Pass the turn. A lot of these cards are great to see right now. So we still have like, I think it's 8 total swamps. We still have 6 Ghost Quarter effects until we start to be strip mined. We untap, Profane Tutor's ticking down. We draw Fulminator, which coincidentally synergizes with Fatal Push quite well. Okay, opponent hits Mountain, Dragon's Rage Channeler. Opponent plays Field, Dragon's Rage Channeler. They wanted that field on board. They did not want to play this mountain. If this is a giant, Bone Crusher giant, they're playing right into our Damnation. Although maybe they were activating field there, I'm not sure. No, that if they were activating field, they would have paid the complete cost. Opponent decides to play a Soul Guide Lantern instead. Exiling our Cling to Dust, sure. And another Ratchet Bomb. Putting a Mountain into the grave. Okay, we untap. Profane Tutor coming off Suspend. So cast Profane Tutor. Let's go get an Urborg. We draw another Cling. So play Urborg. And I think I'm just going to hard cast March here for as much life as I can. It's important to note that if I cast Cling here, I need to be hitting stuff out of my opponent's grave for as long as they have Soul Guide's Lantern, because Soul Guide's Lantern can exile an opponent's grave, but not their own. Okay, they have another Atsushi. We untap. We draw Barren Moor. So, Cling Mountain. Another Urborg. Cling... should I just cast Damnation, actually? Alright, let's do that. Cast Damnation. I'm going to hold on to this Urborg and this Barren Moor. If my opponent's running out of action, they might field or Cleansing Wildfire just to do something. And if they do something that lets us have an untapped mana, then I can cycle this Barren Moor or Cling to get some extra value. Okay. They Cleansing Wildfire our Urborg. We get a Swamp. Okay, they play another Ratchet Bomb. I don't think Ratchet Bomb is particularly good against us. I think it's actually just like a desperation maneuver for, like they have no way to deal with other artifact permanents and stuff. And Karn handles Ratchet Bomb just fine. So I'm actually going to Cling to Dust something out of my opponent's grave. It doesn't really matter what we exile here. We don't have any artifacts to buy back. Can we draw Coffers? Coffers is pretty good. So I'm going to play another Urborg. And then I'm going to pass. Okay, opponent charges up that Ratchet Bomb. They cycle Soul Guide Lantern, so they are not worried about that at all. They're going to Cleansing Wildfire Urborg. Get a Damnation. Opponent plays a Mountain into another Atsushi. We draw a Swamp. So, let's see. If I play Coffers, I have 8 mana post-Coffers activation, which is enough to play Karn and Ensnaring Bridge. Of course, I can just Damnation, and then, like, Cling. I think that's probably better here. Well, I can't Cling, but I can activate Field anyway. Opponent gets double Den of the Bugbear. Okay, so we're just going to wait. Opponent charging up Ratchet Bombs. I kind of want them to activate Field, just so we get a couple more Swamps on board, and we can just play Coffers like a ritual. But I think they're probably worried about us getting a Coffers, so they're just going to wait. I could have activated Field to take out Spikefield Cave, but I'll wait for them to play a Den of the Bugbear, probably. Opponent discards Bone Crusher Giant and Spikefield Hazard. They're going to field my field. So if I do this, they actually strip mine themselves. Okay. They were doing that to protect Den of the Bugbear. And they play Dragon's Rage Channeler. So we untap. We draw Barren Moor. Now I can play Coffers for a whole ton of mana. The problem is I need both Bridge and Chalice on one. There's no way this is the wrong move. I don't think. We'll cycle Barren Moor first. Sign in Blood. Perfect. Damnation. Pass the turn. Oh shoot. I should not have passed there. I should have clung to get rid of Seasoned Pyro. Okay, opponent Cleansing Wildfire. Sure. We get a Swamp. And they cast a Bone Crusher Giant. Okay, so now we cling to gain some life. Untap. We draw Profane Tutor. So play Cabal Coffers. Activate. I could just probably win with Sundering Titan here. So let's play Chalice on 1. And suspend Profane Tutor and pass. So what this is going to do is my opponent is going to attack Karn with Bone Crusher. Then they're going to activate a Ratchet Bomb probably on 0. Opponent did not attack with Den of the Bugbear. Oh, I need to wait until they blow it up, actually. And they're not going to. Alright. So Profane Tutor ticking down. We draw Damnation. Play Verdant Catacombs. Blow up the world. Pass the turn. I think it was better to get Ensnaring Bridge there for Karn to try and stay alive. Actually, I don't know what I was thinking. They take up Ratchet Bomb to 5 and 4. That's interesting. Okay, they Reckless Impulse. They get an Abrade and a Ghost Quarter. Abrade can handle Chalice without them having to give up Ratchet Bomb. That's what they go for. So they gotta activate Den of the Bugbear and attack, right? Well, they're choosing between that or activating Ghost Quarter. Okay. So now what we do is fetch our last swamp. So Strip Mine is now a thing from our opponent. Make sure we exile the artifact. Cling. We draw Cling. Cling. We draw Invoke Despair. Cling again. Hitting Cleansing Wildfire. Cling one more time. We hit Walking Ballista. Okay, Walking Ballista's good. Opponent attacks us for 3, they make a token. We untap. Profane Tutor coming off, suspend. Oh, so they're trying to tick this up so we don't Ugin them, is what it is. Let's get an Invoke Despair. We're just going to draw a whole bunch of cards, drain our opponent for a whole bunch, and then try and like combo kill with Ballista. So play Ugin. Play Karn. Wish with Karn. Get Ensnaring Bridge. Play Ensnaring Bridge. Uptick Ugin for a blocker. This has Menace. Does it? No, it doesn't. Okay. Should be good enough. Opponent was not able to tick up Ratchet Bomb to 6. So even if they immediately answer Karn, Ugin sticks around for a turn. They have an Abrade. Alucard, what are you meowing about? Where are you? Okay, opponent's going to exile a card from her grave. They exile a Cling. Okay, they animate Den of the Bugbear. Let's go ahead and block. Okay, we get our Urborg. Opponent Ghost Quarters us. We have no basic lands left. Untap. We draw Sign in Blood. Play an Urborg. Wish. Get a Sundering Titan. Play Sundering Titan. Take out this and a mountain. Uptick Ugin. Play Karn again. Uptick Karn. We'll wait and cast Ballista. No, actually this is fine. Okay. Clear the board, pass the turn. Because now we can just cast Invoke and then swing, and that's probably game. Okay, opponent plays Ghost Quarter. We will not use Ghost Quarter's ability. Untap. We draw an Urborg. Play an Urborg. Cast Invoke Despair. Cast Invoke Despair. Go to combat. Really feels like casting Lava Axe. Okay, kill our opponent. Well played, M. Hayashi. I think you outplayed me, and I just didn't get punished for it. So, I'll see you guys in round 3. Alrighty, welcome to round 3, everybody. I would like to play first, and sand seems alright, so I think we'll keep. Got a couple of swamps, and a coffers, a few 1-mana plays, and a damnation seems good. So we'll have to rely on our opponent to put something in the grave for Cling to be anywhere near useful, but a lot of decks do nowadays. A lot of other decks don't. I'm going to push here on the off chance that my opponent just missequenced, because that could stop them from playing something like Esper Sentinel, which would be annoying. So we play a Verdant Catacombs that we draw and pass. Opponent plays another Darksteel Citadel. They've got a Ginger Brute. They add green. This could be Hardened Scales then. Cranial Plating. I think because my opponent has nothing else to do this turn, I'm going to just march here for 1. Okay. We untap. We draw Dismember. I guess there's no reason I have to cling at sorcery. I'm already holding a land. So, play a swamp, pass the turn. Opponent untaps. So I'm not sure if this is Affinity or if this is Hammer, what the deal is. Another Cranial Plating. Nothing else. So I'm going to go ahead and cling Catacombs to draw a card. We draw Walking Ballista. That's a very noisy cat. Alucard, where are you, buddy? What are you doing? He's been coming down here and meowing a lot for what appears to be no apparent reason. Hey, what are you doing? Huh, strange. Okay, well, we're playing Coffers, and now the question becomes, what do we do with our mana? I think right now we're fine to go ahead and run out of Ballista X2. We can potentially kill a lot of X1s that our opponent could play, and I'm gonna be right back. Sorry about that. Cat was, I don't mind him being down here. It's just he started to, like, investigate the insulation that's exposed over in the corner, and I don't want him getting into that. Opponent plays a Mirror Enforcer. Hang on. Wouldn't leave it alone. Alright, so opponent plays a Thought Monitor. They're going to draw some cards. Another Mirror Enforcer. And a Sojourner's Companion. And a Memnite. Alright, well, I think it's Damnation time. If my opponent's going to extend that far out. Okay, we draw a Sign in Blood. Cast Damnation. Okay, opponent is left with 1 card in hand. They draw a card. They play a Welding Jar. We untap. We draw a Profane Tutor. So, Sign in Blood. See if we draw land. We draw Invoke Despair and a Sign in Blood. Or, I mean, we draw Invoke Despair and a Fatal Push, excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and suspend Profane Tutor here. Opponent plays a Treasure Vault. Passes back to us. We draw a Swamp. I'm going to go ahead and cast Invoke Despair, because it's going to draw us a bunch of cards here. Okay, we get a Barren Moor, a Cling to Dust, and a Profane Tutor. Opponent sacks to make treasure tokens. That's interesting. They untap. They Thought Cast. Oh, okay, so they were just desperate to Thought Cast. They play a Frogmite. They play a land. They equip. And equip. Okay. I'm going to Dismember right now, because it's the only kill spell I have that can kill that Frogmite. I was going to say, if that didn't work, I was going to have to use this Profane Tutor to find something to do that. But as of right now, let's go ahead and get Karn, the Great Creator. We draw Urborg, which is like possibly our best top deck. Go ahead and play Karn. Opponent can't even tap for mana right now. So I think we're just going to start upticking. and blowing up lands. Can suspend another Profane Tutor. Can sign in blood again. Pass the turn. If there's stuff we really want to kill that's non-creature, we can animate it and then just cast Damnation. Okay. Karn got us there. Almost all of our opponent's lands are going to be indestructible, so I don't think Fulminator is good. Necromentia naming maybe like a Thoughtcast effect or a Thought Monitor could be really good, but I'm not 100% on that. I think we're just going to run it back as is and see what happens. Alright, we'll probably be on the draw this game. This hand should technically do stuff, so I'm going to keep it. Okay, opponent starts Darksteel Citadel, Ornithopter, Ornithopter, pass. We untap and draw Fatal Push. So let's play Verdant Catacombs, pass the turn. Opponent plays a Saga. Okay. And is going to pass again. So crack Verdant Catacombs, get a Swamp. We are going to Cling to draw a card. We draw another Swamp. Okay, we draw Karn. Play a Swamp. I'm not going to run out Ballista. We're going to pass. I'm probably going to have to cycle this Barren Moor to find another Swamp. But that should be fine. Okay, opponent's going to Artifact Land Cycle Sojourner's Companion. They get a blue-black land, okay? Saga gains its second ability. They play another Saga. Okay. They pass. We cycle more. We can play this Coffers for our land drop for the turn. We just need to hit another Swamp by, I was going to say the turn after. But that works. Untap. We draw Sign in Blood. So let's Sign in Blood. Okay. Play a Swamp. And we're going to pass the turn. I think I'm going to discard this Walking Ballista. I could push now. Actually, I won't have to because I won't have to discard because I can push, and I am going to push that. Okay. So opponent gets to probably tutor up a Springleaf Drum. Yep. Okay. They play out Mistvault Bridge. So they are representing Metallic Rebuke. It is only slightly unfortunate that we cannot cast Invoke Despair this turn. We drew a second Damnation, which is nice. I'm going to play Coffers, and I'm going to cast Damnation. I briefly thought about playing Field of Ruin there, but they're going to lose their Urza Saga anyway. Okay, they have Metallic Rebuke. So as long as we're not dead this turn, this next Damnation should get some pretty big value. Okay, we don't care about Welding Jar. The only thing that matters here is if they have a second Metallic Rebuke. They play a Relic, and they play out Sojourner's Companion. We're getting hit for 11. Okay, we draw Cling to Dust, play Field. Damnation. Okay, opponent's going to regenerate, even though Damnation says can't be regenerated. Since they have no mana, I'm going to Cling right now to gain life. Alright, pass the turn to my opponent, and they scoop. Alright, we get a quick 2-0 versus Affinity. I'll see you guys in round 4. Alright, welcome to round 4. I think this hand is a little bit too sketchy with double Coffers. There's a decent chance we can make it work because we're on the draw. I almost certainly would have to cycle this Barren Moor, though, and then I wouldn't have a second mana-producing land. But I would have 3 draws to try and find one to suspend Profane Tutor. If I knew what my opponent was on, this would be easier. If it was aggro, I probably wouldn't keep. If it's a slower deck, I probably will. Alright, we'll try it. There's nothing, like, incredibly wrong with this hand, but... Okay, opponent starts Black Cleave Cliffs into nothing. We draw Fatal Push. That does make me feel a little bit better. We're going to lead on Verdant Catacombs. Opponent untaps to play a second Black Cleave Cliffs into a Douthie Voidwalker. I should have actually fetched prior because I want this card in the grave. So there's a slight punt on my part there. Kill this immediately. Okay. We untap. Would like to see another swamp, ideally an Urborg. Okay, we did not. Yeah, I guess I have to play that now. I mean, Profane Tutor can find us Urborg, of course. So it's not too big of a deal, but it's just going to be slow. Okay, opponent fetches with Bloodstained Mire. They get a swamp. They play Waste Not. Uh-oh. Well, we lost 2 Cabal Coffers and an Ugin. So opponent gets a lot more mana and an extra card. So Dauthi Voidwalker and Burning Inquiry seems pretty good. We lost our Karn. So opponent is going to get more mana and more cards. And they play Bob. Okay. Can't say this is a card, or can't say this is a deck I've run into before. I'm also, not going to lie, I'm a little intimidated because I see Underworld Breach in my opponent's discard pile. So, Suspend Profane Tutor will pass. Opponent reveals a second Waste Knot. That's a ton of engine power there. They play a land. They crack Bloodstained Mire. They get a Blood Crypt untapped. So they're going to need at least 4 mana this turn. This could be a second kicked Turok. Oh, okay. No, they're playing the Waste Knot first. That makes sense. So they're going to force us to discard. I'm going to discard Invoke Despair because that only lets them draw cards, I guess. Whereas if they get a bunch of mana by me discarding this Coffers... Actually, maybe that is better. Yeah, let's do the Coffers because that way if they have something else they can cast, then they can cast it. But making them draw 2 cards by discarding anything else for free is a lot bigger of a problem. All right. Opponent now draws a zillion cards and gets a ton of mana. And Turok also gets really, really big. This is going to be a tough matchup. Mainly because Burning Inquiry attacking your hand, just like mulliganing you, makes you a lot worse. The Inquisition, thankfully we don't have anything they can take. They cling. Okay, they cling again. Thoughtseize, they're going to draw more cards, make Turok bigger. I think we're dead. If I draw Fatal Push and I can kill Turok, then maybe I can stay alive, but them just reloading their hand like this is pretty brutal. Normally what I could do here is I could like tutor for Damnation off of Profane Tutor, but that's 2 turns away and I'll be dead in 2 turns. So thankfully we don't have creatures to be discarding for them to basically kill us with. So I can play this land, I can cling, and I can draw a card or I can gain 3 life, and neither of them matter. So we got by Waste Knot. Okay, I think it's time for Necromentia. I think it's time for Fulminator. What is bad in this matchup? Ugin has some utility, although I might cut him because he's just so slow. I think March is fine. We're going to need some instant speed removal in the low mana slot. I think I'm going to sideboard this other Ballista. Profane Tutor actually seems critical in this matchup. We need to be aware if we're cycling to, like, actually discarding Barren Moor, because that will trigger what our opponent is doing. I don't know that I want to cut Invoke Despair. You know, maybe I don't need Fulminator. I am going to bring in the Necromentia, though. I think Necromentia is somewhat important. Cut, like, a Damnation and maybe a Cling, and we'll try it like this. Okay, I would like to play first. Yeah, we'll keep this. So, start Verdant Catacombs, pass the turn. Yeah, Voidwalker and Burning Inquiry seems like a pretty good combo. Okay, we're getting Thoughtseized. So we're going to fetch a swamp and then cling the fetch. The nice thing about Barren Moor is it is a cycle that, like, you can kind of hide a card behind it, if that makes sense. I imagine opponent takes either Fatal Push or Sign in Blood. 1, because it's the only thing they can take, but I think they take Sign in Blood here. They're probably not as worried about a Fatal Push. Yep, they take Sign in Blood. Okay. We untap and draw Ugin. So I'm going to play out an Urborg. Pass the turn. I'm going to hope we get a Coffers. Simply so we can cast him. If we can resolve like an Ugin or a Karn, we're probably okay. Opponent plays a Dauthi Voidwalker. Okay, we do have to push that. Cycle more. Get Necromentia. Okay. We draw another Urborg. Let's go ahead and Necromentia. We have 2 options here. We can name Turok or we can name Waste Knot. And I'm going to name Waste Knot. Okay, opponent is holding a Turok, which is kind of a problem. They're 2 turns away from playing and, like, kicking him, though. But when they do, we will lose our hand. I'm kind of glad that I named something that wasn't in their hand, because while that would deny them the cards, it doesn't put me under any pressure yet. They'll probably play their other Voidwalker this turn. There it is. Okay. We draw Damnation. So, I have 2 options. I can play Field and pass, and opponent will play and kick a Turok, in which case, we have a 1 in 3 chance of keeping a Damnation in our hand, which, if we do, is really good. If we don't, it's really bad. Because, actually, even if we do keep Damnation in hand, they just immediately sack Voidwalker, get Ugin. So we have to play Field, play Damnation, and then give up on the other 2 cards in our hand. Because otherwise our opponent gets a Planeswalker, which is really good, a really good Planeswalker for them to have, too. So there's no way opponent does not Turok here. So, like, our best draw would be, like, Sign in Blood into Fatal Push land or something like that. Because there's Turok, we lose our hand. Turok gets bigger. We untap. We draw a Swamp. So, play a Swamp. Pass the turn. We can cling to draw a card on our opponent's end step. So that's probably what we're going to do. With us having no cards in hand, I was going to say opponent can't make Turok any bigger, but that was a lie. So we dumped March, Invoke, and Cling. Okay, opponent plays a tap land. Goes to combat. Hits us for 7. We go to 12. So let's go ahead and Cling, Burning Inquiry. I could have done this during combat on the off chance I did draw Push, but... And there's a reason we're hitting Burning Inquiry and not a land or a Thoughtseize, and that's because if my opponent does play an Underworld Breach, they could Burning Inquiry a bunch of times and then just kill us. I should make that clear. That's definitely not an obvious thing. Or maybe it is to other people, but it wouldn't be obvious to me if I were watching. Opponent is thinking. If we draw Invoke, it's really good. If we draw Damnation, it's fine. If we draw a kill spell, it's good. If we draw Karn, it's okay. If we draw... There's a lot of things we could draw. Like, any land Ugin would be fine between this and our draw step. Just about the only thing that doesn't work is land. Okay, opponent is just going really slow. Okay, we draw a land, so untap. We draw Dismember, which can shrink Turok by quite a bit, but does not stop him from doing a bunch of damage. So play a Swamp, pass the turn. Opponent untaps. Okay, opponent plays a Douthie Voidwalker, goes to combat, attacks us for 7. I can shrink this down to 2, and then I would be dead exactly next turn unless I clung a creature. Alternatively, I can just Dismember Voidwalker and Cling for 2 life, taking a total of 9 and going to 3. That's a little more dangerous if I don't hit a creature with Cling, and I think I need to draw. But that does give us the out of having Invoke, and then maybe drawing something else. So I suppose what I should do... I could play around like a Lightning Bolt by clinging a creature, though. I guess at 6 mana, I can play everything in my deck. So we'll Cling Voidwalker. Gain a life. Now if I Dismember, I'd pay 2, go to 13, take 2, go to 11, and I would live at 1 if they only had Voidwalker and Turok. Otherwise I can Dismember, pay 2, kill Voidwalker, take 7, go to 6, and then die to Turok the next turn if I draw nothing. So actually this potentially buys me 1 more turn, and if I draw Damnation, this is better. Okay, we go to 11. Untap, we draw Invoke. Invoke Despair. If we draw a Fatal Push, we're fine. I think opponent has to sack Voidwalker. Yeah, okay. We did not draw Fatal Push. If I cycle, this gets bigger and puts me back in bolt range. Yeah, I really regret not dismembering the Voidwalker and just taking the extra damage, because Invoke would have been great there. Okay, well, play Barren Moor, pass the turn. I suppose I could have just waited to cycle it until next turn to maybe draw another out, because there's not much I can do on 7 that I couldn't do on 6. Although if my opponent, I was going to say, fails to make us discard, this would make March lethal for Turok. But forcing us to discard does put us in bolt range, which our opponent is probably playing if they're playing this many red lands. We go to 3. Untap. We draw Fatal Push. Okay, I don't think they can have any combat tricks that will save Turok. So we're going to see if we can't get them to use a discard spell here. Okay, they're not going to. So we push. Okay, there's another Turok. I'm going to thin my deck here. Get a swamp. We untap. Draw another Urborg. Well, I guess we play it out. This way, like my opponent, if they had anything, they would have had like Midnight Charm to force me to discard, and that would be lethal. So if they have another Burning Inquiry, then it will kill us. If they have anything that can force us to draw and then discard. We take 2, go to 1. And they drain us. Let's see, 1 card deeper, 2 cards deeper. Had I cycled Barren Moor, I would have gotten this far, and that wouldn't have been enough. I might have been able to cling again to gain life. But even in the like best case scenario where I cast all these spells, I get this deep and we weren't drawing anything. That's really unfortunate, but hey, we're 2-2. I'll see you guys in round 5. Alrighty, and round 5. I'd like to play first. Gigantha. Now, most decks that I've seen playing Gigantha are not actually Tron. I've seen it in the Elemental deck. There was one other deck that was really weird that I saw playing Gigantha recently that wasn't a Tron deck, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it is. I don't think this hand is keepable, though, not on the play. This hand is much better. I'm going to keep, and I'm going to put back March. So we're going to start on Swamp, pass the turn. Okay, opponent starts Bauble. I don't know what the hell that noise was. That was super weird. I think that was my work computer. Just like fan spun up to 1000% and then it died. So that's super concerning. Okay, we untap. Opponent draws a card. We draw an Urborg. Play an Urborg. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps, they draw. So is this just like the Lurrus deck, but with Gigantha instead of Lurrus? Okay, we're getting Thoughtseize, that's fine. His opponent has to take Ugin, have no other legal targets. They play Polluted Delta, so cycle Barren Moor. We draw a Swamp, which is perfectly fine by us, and we draw Profane Tutor. So play a Swamp, suspend Profane Tutor, and pass the turn. Opponent untaps, plays a Watery Grave off of a Polluted Delta. Expressive Iteration, exile a Bauble. They play a Bauble, they play Bloodstained Mire, they crack Bloodstained Mire, they shock it down to 10, and play Death Shadow. So we untap, Profane Tutor ticking down. Opponent's going to Bauble our top deck. We draw Invoke Despair. Play Verdant Catacombs, pass the turn. Opponent untaps, they draw an extra card. So the only problem here is my opponent's probably going to have a counterspell for Invoke Despair in the form of Spell Pierce. Opponent casts an Expressive Iteration. So maybe they won't have a counterspell. Depends on whether or not they have blue mana or not. They get a Thoughtseize, so they're going to cast Thoughtseize here. If they cast Thoughtseize and don't have another land, like, I can just tutor for an Invoke and kill Shadow anyway. Okay, there's the Thoughtseize. I think if my opponent plays an untapped blue source here, we have to tutor for, like, a push or something. Okay, they fetch, they shock, so they probably have a Spell Pierce or a second Shadow. Okay, if that's the case, then we're definitely tutoring for Damnation, because I think we have to. So, crack Verdant Catacombs, get a Swamp, just because I don't really want to draw any more Swamps if I can avoid it. It's unlikely that we're going to need push for anything. Like, I mean, in, what do you call that? Revolted push. So let's get a Damnation. We draw Coffers. Opponent knows I'm holding a Swamp. They do not know I'm holding Coffers. So, Damnation. Pass the turn. Now we just need to draw anything we can resolve. If I draw another Invoke prior to my opponent playing a creature, it would kill them. Okay. So we lose Coffers. That's unfortunate. Opponent's going to replay Death Shadow here. Okay. Anything that could kill Shadow here would be great. Invoke would be especially good. Swamp is not what I asked for. I do regret not playing that Coffers because of K command, but I think I have to hold this Swamp in case of a second K command, because otherwise they could just instant speed discard me on my draw step, and I would lose whatever it is I drew. Okay, opponent can fetch Shock to lethal. That is unfortunate. I really dislike Shadow as a card. I'm going to bring in Fulminators and Necromentia, actually. I'm going to cut Ballista, Dismember, one Profane Tutor, one Cling. I'm only going to bring in 2 Necromentia. Let's try like this. Okay, I would like to play first. Well, we have Fatal Push and we have Cling, so I'm going to keep. We also have a really good land sequence here. Start with Swamp, pass the turn. Okay, opponent plays Scalding Tarn, they crack it. They shock a Blood Crypt, and Thoughtseize. Okay, well, there's nothing I can do to really stop this, so... Opponent gets a Thoughtseize. I think they take Push. Could take Damnation, but Push just seems more important. They then play Bauble. And they pass, so I'm going to Cling a Thoughtseize. We draw Verdant. I'm going to Bauble our top deck. They see we have an Ugin. Play an Urborg. Pass the turn. Opponent draws for Bauble. Opponent shocks a Steam Vents. And they dash Ragavan. Cycle Barren Moor. We draw Karn. So Ragavan is going to connect. They exile an Urborg, which is fine. We didn't want to draw another Urborg. Okay, they pick Ragavan back up. We untap. We draw Sign in Blood. So cast Sign in Blood. Play Coffers. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps. They play a Bloodstained Mire. They crack Bloodstained Mire. And they shock Watery Grave. Thoughtseize. Okay. Opponent sees we are not holding removal. I think they have to take Ugin if they're holding up Drown in the Lock, because unless I cycle this Barren Moor, they can't Drown in the Lock Ugin. So they'll take Ugin, they'll expect me to play Karn next turn, and they'll try and drown Karn off of... They take Damnation. Okay, so opponent has a counterspell that will hit Ugin, or they're not worried about him. Opponent casts Ragavan, and Shadow, and Inquisitions. I don't know that that was correct, but they can only take Profane Tutor. I guess for me to be able to play Ugin, I have to draw another Coffers, but I do have a Barren Moor for a cycle. Okay, opponent is passing. Cycle Moor, we draw another Karn. We top deck Damnation, that's pretty good. They must have a second Ragavan. Pass the turn. Opponent puts Gigantha in their hand. That's what I want to see. Second Coffers, alright. Play Ugin. Play Karn. Wish with Karn. Let's get Ensnaring Bridge. Play Ensnaring Bridge. Uptick Ugin. Make a token. Pass the turn. Okay, it's probably an expressive iteration looking for like an Unholy Heat. They only have... Okay, they do have Delirium, because they have creature, sorcery, land, artifact. There's the Unholy Heat. So they can kill Karn. Or they can kill Ugin. I can tell you that no matter what they kill, it's wrong. Because I'm holding a second Karn. Okay, opponent kills Karn to try and dodge a Sundering Titan. We draw Invoke Despair, which will be a great follow-up. Play second Karn. Wish. Get Sundering Titan. Play Sundering Titan. Hit all their lands. Make another token. Pass the turn. Okay, we draw Necromentia. Go to combat. Attack for 4. I hope I didn't reveal hand. I might have clicked reveal hand. I think I'm only going to keep the one Necromentia. We'll try it like this. For game 3, I think Cling, cycling, or gaining life early is going to be more important. Okay, so this hand is risky. But we are on the draw. I think we can keep. Opponent starts Polluted Delta. Shock Blood Crypt. Thoughtseize. I think they take March here. They could take Cling, but they take an Invoke Despair. Interesting. We untap. They bobble our top deck. We draw a Swamp. So they know our whole hand. So let's play a Swamp. I guess there's no reason to sorcery speed Cling. Opponent untaps and draws. If they dash Ragavan, we march, pitching Invoke. Okay, second bauble. They play a land. And they pass, so... Cling Thoughtseize. We draw an Urborg. Untap. We draw Karn. Play Urborg. Pass the turn. Opponent baubles themselves. Decides they don't like what they see on top. They shock to 12. They untap, they draw a card, then they draw a card for turn. Expressive iteration. They get Dragon's Rage Channeler. They shock and they play Channeler. What are the odds that they have Street Wraith? I don't know, but I'm going to ping. Okay, 0, apparently. We draw Sign in Blood, so Sign in Blood. Play a Swamp. Pass the turn. I'm going to cycle this Barren Moor. Really hoping we hit a Coffers, to be completely honest. Okay, opponent plays a Death Shadow. We draw Cling. Untap. We draw Verdant. Play Verdant. Cast Damnation. I mean, if they just have, like, Fetch Shock, Counterspell, Fetch Shock, Land, and then Temur Battle Rage or something, we're going to die, but I think that was a worthy Damnation. This is probably going to be a K-Command picking Shadow backup, and if it is, Invoke Despair is going to be really good. Okay, so they did pick up Shadow. We're going to discard Cling. Okay, another expressive iteration for our opponent. Inquisition, which can take nothing. They play Bloodstained Mire. Inquisition. I mean, our deck, by virtue of deck construction, frequently dodging Inquisition of Kozilek feels pretty good, I must say. So now opponent's probably going to be a little bit reluctant to run out Shadow. Okay, they fetch a basic Swamp. They play Shadow. We untap. We draw a Swamp. I'm going to play this out, and I'm going to cast Invoke Despair. They probably have a Spell Pierce or a Stubborn Denial, just based on them tapping that way. We're going to have to hope that... Oh, they don't. They just ran Shadow out naked because they were like, yeah, we'll just bluff a Counterspell, and then, you know, it's not like he has to cast Invoke. The answer is yes, I do. If we draw Coffers, it's basically all over, because we just play out everything at the same time. If we draw Invoke and they don't have a threat on board, they die unless they can counter it. Okay, they get a Thoughtseize. Play Dragon's Rage Channeler. They cast Thoughtseize and go to 3. Well, now, if they let me keep Karn, I can probably just get Walking Ballista and kill them if I top deck a Coffers. They took Ugin. We untap. We draw Swamp. I can either cycle Barren Moor, see if I hit Coffers, then play Karn. I could play Karn, wish for Dross Golem, but then Karn would die to Dragon's Rage. Oh, Karn's dying to Dragon's Rage Channeler no matter what we wish for. I could play a Swamp, play Karn, get Chalice and put it on 1, which would be really strong, but then I can no longer cling. It's probably Dross Golem, to be completely honest. The old 3-2 with Fear. I mean, odds are that my opponent has like an Unholy Heat or a Lightning Bolt that they haven't used. So, you know, they'll probably be able to kill both of these things. But then we have a Barren Moor cycle on their end step to try and find something. I could have wished for Relic, actually, and nuked both graves. I forget that Relic is in this version's Wishboard. If I had done that, I would have gotten a redraw, and this would have become a 1-1. I guess this is still better because it like makes them have some sort of answer. Okay, opponent gets to Surveil. They put Alpine Moon into the grave. They're gonna dash Ragavan. Cycle Barren Moor. Okay, we draw Sign in Blood. Ragavan enters. Opponent goes to combat. I mean, if I draw a second Sign in Blood, we can just you could just ask them to sign for their package from hell and kill them. Okay, opponent hits us with Ragavan. They hit Necromentia. So they could Necromentia Karn, or they could Necromentia Ugin. And that would be pretty good. That's our singleton Necromentia. Of course, if we were holding another Karn, and they Necromentia Karn, they would just, like, lose to zombies. Okay? So opponent gets to see our hand and deck. This does mean that we have to win with an Invoke, or we have to win with a, like, double Sign in Blood situation. If they name Karn, which is what I fully expect them to name. They could name Coffers. I don't think that would be good. So they're currently naming... If they name Urborg, they die instantly. I mean, like... You know? I doubt they would name that, but it's worth pointing out, I guess. They named Damnation. Interesting. Alright, so we can't draw Damnations. I guess that's fine. Opponent's looking at my hand, looking at my deck. They exile the one out of the grave. Okay. They pick up Ragavan. We untap. We draw Profane Tutor. So, Sign in Blood. Draw Fulminator. Cycle Barren Moor. Cycle Barren Moor. Play a Swamp. Play Fulminator. Probably should have suspended Profane Tutor there, actually, but... This is a 2-2. It can attack. I could, like, big brain Fulminator my own Urborg. So they would have to crack Bloodstained Mire, but... They're going to pick up Death Shadow. They could float black mana in response, though, so that's not really worth it. Okay. Yeah, I definitely should have suspended Profane Tutor. I should not have played out Fulminator there. That was a mistake. It may not have been fast enough, but it was definitely the correct choice. They're still, like, just an Invoke from dead. Opponent attacks us for 5. They exile a Field of Ruin, which is good, because we didn't want to top deck that. They play Death Shadow. They pick Ragavan back up. So we need an answer to Death Shadow this turn, or we lose. Okay, Sign in Blood. Play Coffers. Make a bunch of mana. Cling K command. Sign in Blood. Okay. Cling a Steam Vents. We did not draw Fatal Push. Yeah. Okay. So Profane Tutor wouldn't have been fast enough, and we just kind of bricked in the late game there. Unfortunately, we never drew multiple Sign in Bloods like right in a row, because if we did, then we could have just killed our opponent. We did not see our other 2 Invoke Despairs that were still in our deck, even though there's only a third of our deck left. So, ended up losing. But honestly, that matchup is not that bad. It's definitely not that hard. And the Singleton Necromentia actually ended up screwing us off Ragavan, but that's not something that you can really play around. The main deck of this deck is generally made in such a way that opponent hitting cards out of the main deck doesn't really do anything off of Ragavan. Like, the only card that they can hit that actually matters is, like, Cling to Dust and Sign in Blood. Basically everything else, unless they're already winning or the super, super late game, they can't even cast, or they wouldn't cast. So, all in all, I think this version of the deck's pretty solid, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!